Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast, in which a long-time Agatha Christie collector and her Christie novice husband discuss the works of the Queen of Crime in publication order. In this episode, we take a look at the Seven Dials mystery.
Welcome to the Chronological Christie podcast. We are your hosts.
Gillian Porter, a long-time Agatha Christie reader and collector.
And her husband, Alan Porter, who after almost 40 years of sharing a house with Agatha Christie books, has decided that he should read them.
We'll be tackling the books in UK publication order as detailed on the official Agatha Christie website and sharing our thoughts on each of them from the viewpoint of someone familiar with them.
And someone reading them for the first time.
In this episode, we will be taking a look at the Seven Dials mystery, first published in 1929. What was going on in the world, Alan?
Good question, Jill. As those of you who listen to us regularly know that before we dive into the book itself, we thought it would be interesting to place it into the context of what was happening in the UK and the world at large at this time. So what was going on in 1929? In the world at large, January 1929 saw the first appearances of iconic comics characters Tintin in Belgium and Popeye in the US. Funny that they both debuted in the same month.
Isn't it? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. The following month, February, saw the St. Valentine's Day massacre of 5 rival mobsters on the orders of Al Capone in Chicago. One for me, for the car geeks, it was the first year that the Monaco Grand Prix motor race was held. Still going strong. First Academy Awards were held. I think last time we talked about the creation of the Academy, and this year was the year that the first Oscars were awarded. Though I don't think they were called the Oscars just yet. The German airship, the Graf Zeppelin, made the first circumnavigation of the world by air. Of course, 1929 is probably best known as the year of the Wall Street crash, when $30 billion of stock value was wiped out. That time was a value 10 times greater than the annual budget of the US federal government. Major impact on the years to come.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is, isn't it? In the UK, Imperial Airways, the precursor of British Airways, began operating its first commercial international flights. The first transmission of John Logie Bair's experimental 30-line television system, BBC in London. And what are we up to now? 40,000 lines. One for our UK listeners, the first Tesco store opened in Edgware in Middlesex. I did not know Tesco's had been around that long. But there you go.
No, me either. And I mean, they used to be a joke because they were so terrible, but now they're pretty good stores. So.
Yeah, one of our go-to stops whenever we're in the UK.
Yeah. They have good cookies, man.
They do have good cookies. All right, that was what was going on in the world and the UK at large, but let's focus in a bit on what was going on with Agatha at that time, Jill.
Well, I will say in 1929, I didn't find a dreadful amount going on about her. Looked everywhere, but couldn't find very much. But she spent the part of the beginning of the year recovering from the infection in her leg after the vaccination she'd had before Christmas and her long drive back to their home got her leg infected. She ended up in a nursing home, almost lost her leg, and at times was hallucinating. So very unpleasant. Rosalind was still recovering from the measles, so her sister Madge took her home so that she could carry on recovering from the measles, because obviously Agatha couldn't look after her. Later in the year, when she was recovered, she met the Woolies again at a dinner party, and they invited her back out to Ur the following year in 1930. Apologies if that's not how you say it. I don't really know. She planned her trip for that and spent some time in Italy before heading to Beirut to head out to meet with the Woolies.
I think it's I've always pronounced it as That's how my history teacher used to pronounce it, so I'm going with that.
Okay, we'll go with that then.
So if it's
Thank
wrong,
you.
If it's wrong, it's Mr. Blight's problem, not ours. Okay.
Okay, we can blame him. Okay, yeah. Sounds great.
That infection from the vaccinations, really rough. I mean, to almost lose a leg and be hallucinating and stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it was because she drove and it got irritated. And then she was looking after Rosalind because she had measles and she just didn't take care of herself. The description of her hallucinating was, I suppose I could have put that as my quote, really, but it was a bit funky, so I didn't. The description in her autobiography about that time is crazy.
Perhaps I was complaining about our arm aching a bit after the shingles vaccination into the
Yeah, I know, but it does really, doesn't it?
Anyway, we're not here to talk about our aches and complaints. We're here to talk about a book. So this is our regular spoiler warning that during our discussions, we will be diving into plot and character details, as well as talking about who done it and why. And with that said, let's dive into the Seven Dials mystery. Do you want to give us a brief overview of the plot, Jill?
Will do. This is the briefest I could find, and this is quite long. When Gerald Wade died, apparently from an overdose of sleeping draught, 7 clocks appeared on the mantelpiece. Who put them there, and had they any connection with the nightclub in Seven Dials? That is the mystery that Bill Eversley and Bundle and 2 other young people set out to investigate. Their investigations lead them into some queer places, and more than once into considerable danger. Not until the very end of the book is the identity of the mysterious Seven Dials revealed. I want to go in a quick sideways thing here about plot synopsis. Because whilst that's basically what happened, we know where the 7 clocks came from. And I feel like some of these book synopses or blurbs are written by people who haven't actually read the book. Some of them are really misleading. This one isn't too bad, but it does give you the impression that 7 clocks suddenly appeared in his room. I didn't really care for that part. I don't know what you think about that, but we can probably have a long talk about blurbs and plot synopses.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with some of the other ones as well, not just the synopses or the blurb on the back being misleading, but the covers being totally unrepresentative. Sometimes these things are designed and put together by people who either haven't read the book or are working off a summary that somebody else has written, and it's a bit like Chinese whispers type thing, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, but I mean, a lot, well, not all, but some of the covers for the Agatha Christie books, you look at them and you think, hang on a minute, where was that in the book?
I mean, it's a bit like some of the synopses you see online for your streaming shows on Netflix or something. It's like, hang on a minute, did you actually watch the show? And in a lot of cases, they probably have.
Okay, but let's move on and give us your thoughts on the plot, Alan.
I enjoyed this one. I thought the inciting murder mystery around the death of Gerald Wade definitely took a back seat to the main part of the plot pretty quickly. Normally, the whole plot would be figuring out the murder and what all the clues meant, and that was pretty much pushed to one side relatively quickly in favour of the thriller-style hunt to uncover the members of the Seven Dials Secret Society. And I will say I actually really enjoyed that thriller aspect of it. It worked for me. I was quickly along for the ride. Literally, because I read the book in a single sitting on a plane ride from Baltimore to Dallas. Once I was into the book, I just kept reading and reading. So that's a good sign. I liked the quest angle. Again, the light humor, I think, pulled me in, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good, fun read. Not deep, not really that tricky as a sort of whodunit, but as a light thriller airplane ride read, yeah, I really enjoyed it. What about you? Because I know you've read this before, so.
Yeah, this was another one I wasn't looking forward to, as I remembered the twist at the end and who the baddie was. So again, I was surprised to find that it was still very readable, and I enjoyed it. Once I'd let that go and just like you went along for the ride, I read it in a couple of sittings. It didn't take me very long. And I will say, when you said about putting the death of Gerald Wade to the side, they do treat his death and the other deaths in there well. But they are sidelined to the general plot, but they do deal with them with respect. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But I also felt that once you know the ending, it's very interesting to know as you're reading the book that certain comments can be taken multiple ways. I thought that was very clever, going in, everything that the baddie, Jimmy, I can't remember, what was his last name? It was a stupid name. Not stupid, but hard to remember. Once you knew who he was, reading the comments and who the Seven Dials Society were, it made it much more interesting, because the plot is pretty straightforward and it moved at a good pace. And she is really good at writing books that pull you in and keep you turning the pages. But it was also interesting to note as you're reading along that the extra depth that came through knowing the twist at the end, if you like. And the humor she manages to inject never takes away from the seriousness of the men who were murdered. And I feel like that's a delicate balance she also does very, very well.
Yeah, you're right. When I said it was pushed to one side, service of the plot. But you're right. They were treated with respect. They weren't sort of laughed off or anything like that. It was treated properly in both cases, with both the poisoning and the guy who was shot. I thought they were very well done. It was just the central plot very much became the quest plot rather than the solve the murder plot, I think is what I was sort of getting at.
Makes sense. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
To your point about reading it once you know who the bad guys are, I'm actually looking forward at some point to rereading it with that in mind, because it's become very clear to me she is really very, very good at writing stuff in a way that can be taken two ways, depending on what you know. Really skilled at doing that. And this was, I think, is probably another good example of that. If I go back and reread it, I'll probably be able to pick up on things or read things completely differently. And we'll talk about it a bit more with the adaptation as well, because watching the adaptation, knowing who the bad guys are, there was things in there I was like, oh, okay, that's clever. It's a definite skill that she has. Obviously, Roger Ackroyd being probably the pinnacle of it, but this was also very well done in that respect.
I agree. She's very good at it. Okay, well, we'll move on to setting. I really didn't get a sense of place in this at all because there was a lot of rushing around, but I don't think it matters at all, as it's the action that drives the story, especially as we get to experience 3 stately homes and lots of driving to and from London. Weirdly, I felt the gardens got more of a description than the houses. It was fine by me, and they did figure in the action, so that kind of helped a little bit. Descriptions of the house in 7 dials set the scene very well, as this was the most important one to understand, as it sees quite a lot of action of where you are and all that kind of stuff. So when it was needed, she was very good with that. But again, there's an assumption that most readers will understand the workings of a big house. And I do wonder how that affects some readers' enjoyment if they don't.
I get that from a modern perspective. It may not be obvious, though. I suppose if you're reading these, you may also be the sort of person who watches shows like Upstairs, Downstairs and Downton Abbey and all that sort of stuff, and probably picked up just, movies and TV shows and stuff. But I get your point. I think there is that underlying assumption, which actually brings me to sort of my thing. While it was great to be back at Chimneys, I think there was thinking about it, I think she was also working on the assumption that people had actually read Secret Chimneys and were familiar with the setting. As there was stuff that wasn't necessarily explained about Chimneys or the ownership or the way things worked there, I think. I mean, difficult to say because obviously I have read The Secret of Chimneys, so I bought into it. But I just wondered if you hadn't read that book, whether some of the things would have been that clear around ownership and who people were and the relationships between various people. But having said that, I did actually enjoy being back at Chimneys. And between that and was it Wyvern Abbey was the other one?
Yeah. There was another one as well, wasn't there?
I think so, but it was mainly Wyvern Abbey where the theft of the formula took place in the house party, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was good. And the mean streets of London, you're right. I mean, the description of the house location where the nightclub was, I thought was very good. I loved the fact that it was basically a fish and chip restaurant, and that seemed to be the den of iniquity, that they were actually having fish and chips.
I know.
That cracked me up. I don't know if that was a social thing from the time that, fish and chips was a working class thing, that it was risque for the upper class to be having fish suppers. I don't know, but that cracked me up.
Yeah, they were slumming it.
But overall, yes, like I said, I was drawn into the story. Again, maybe a sense of familiarity with it, some of it being set at Chimneys and other similar houses. And again, London, we know the area reasonably well. So yeah, it felt familiar and feasible. I could picture it in my mind as we went along. I sort of just touched on it, so let's go a bit more into the characters. I really felt, again, the real strength of this book was the cast of characters. I didn't count them this time. I'm going to stop doing that. Everybody had a part to play. The books work much better if everybody has a part to play rather than just being a name that wanders on and off the page. Even if they didn't have a big part to play, it was very easy to sort of picture them, get them in your mind, understand their little foibles, even the flapper girls at the party at the beginning, even though you only really knew their names and didn't know too much about them, just the way that they interacted with each other or the group, it really set them in your mind as individuals, which I liked. Again, for me, the standouts had to be the return of Bundle, Lady Ellen Brent, and her father, Lord Caterham. The dynamic between the two of them is priceless. I love that. And I love Lord Caterham's detached, slightly bemused take on events happening around him. It's sort of the world spins around him and he doesn't really notice what's going on. I thought was beautifully done. Good to see other characters from The Secret of Chimney's return. I like the butler, Treadwell. By the way, I said this to Jill, but when I first started to read the book, we weren't actually on the plane. I was actually sat at the gate. And I looked up and there's a guy sat opposite me with a backpack on that actually said Coach Treadwell. I just thought it was a weird coincidence that this guy sat opposite me was called Treadwell as well. So it's good to see Treadwell back. Bill Eversley in an increased role. Inspector Battle was also a much more active participant this time around. I like the new additions. I thought Sir Oswald and Lady Coote were fun, particularly Lady Coote. I thought she was brilliant. And I already mentioned the Bright Young Flapper girls. I thought they were good. If anybody was let down, I actually think it was the other male characters who, even though they were sort of vital to the story, didn't really leave any lasting impression behind. You know, you just said, what's the last name of the guy who turned out to be the bad guy? I can't remember. I know I've got it in the script later on, but it doesn't spring to mind. I can't remember the name of the guy who was shot without looking it up. So that didn't stick in my mind as well, which is a bit of a shame because they are very vital to the plot. But other than that, great characters. Loved it. Loved being in their company. What about you?
Well, like you, it was an excellent set of characters. It was so nice to be back with Bundle, Lady Eileen Caterham, and Lord Caterham. Their interactions were the best part of the book. They were so natural and joyful and completely nonsensical. They're just wonderful. Lady Coote was very entertaining, and I loved her interactions with her husband when they played bridge. She knew she was a better player, but had no need to push the point as long as he paid her what she was owed. She didn't have that need to show off and prove that she was better than him, and I thought that was a much better way of playing it. I really enjoyed that part. I also loved the differences of how Lady Coote and Lord Caterham and Bundle dealt with the morose gardener MacDonald. That was totally delightful. It started off feeling sorry for Lady Coote, but through Christie's writing, you could see that she was much more in charge than initially shown, which was very clever. I mean, obviously, she'd rather have her own neat little home that they first had before her husband became titled and very rich. But she was also enjoying life as well, which I thought was very cleverly written. And I agree with you. The young men were all rather blah and interchangeable, except Bill Eversley. I thought he was really well written. The difference between him being a bumbling idiot and somebody a lot more than that was also very cleverly done. Bad guy Jimmy was rather blah, but knowing he was a thief, because I've read it before, I could tell from a few things he said, but he was still rather a background character, which is kind of, well, not cheaty, but an interesting choice, shall we say. Same with Lorraine. She was pretty nothingly to me as well. But I really want to know what happened to poor old Alfred. I thought he had a good character. Was he found and given further employment because he was given that job because he was trustworthy? And then Bundle sends him off with £10 and says, just get out of here. And you feel like he was only doing what he thought for the best. I do feel very sorry for him.
I must admit, I was surprised at that. I thought Bundle would have been come back to the house and have your old job back.
Yeah.
As a footman, rather than just basically, here's some money, go away, which seemed out of character.
Yes,
because she seemed to care for him when she saw him there and was like, what are you doing here? And then, oh, you could get in trouble. She seemed to want to, protect him. And then at the end, it was, like you said, it was just, here's £10.
Run away.
Don't bother me again.
Okay, so we'll move on to the denouement. I was really disappointed Bundle hadn't worked it out. My memory was that she had and was playing Jimmy Thesiger along. The rest was rather muted. It was a rather long explanation. I preferred to see his action rather than Bundle being coshed. None of it absolutely needed to take place in the Seven Dials house. I did like the part where they're showing that Bill Eversley wasn't as stupid as he made out finally. But why they didn't bring Bundle in earlier and misfeed information, I thought would have been good. That didn't make any sense at all. And again, poor old Alfred. I already knew that the Seven Dials group were the good guys, but the way it came in all just seemed a bit iffy to me. It seemed to be a bit of an afterthought about what it was all about in the first place with Jimmy Thesiger and what he was stealing. That side of it I didn't feel was filled out enough for me. It was obviously a thief stealing stuff to sell, but I just don't think the book dealt with it as I felt it should have been dealt with. Does that make sense? It was more about the thriller aspect than about why they needed to be doing what they were doing. But what did you think?
Agree with you. I think the theft, the whole secret formula thing, which was introduced partway through, and then the machinations around the theft of that, which as a heist narrative, I don't think really worked that well. Again, was very much secondary to the who are the Seven Dials, secret society, who are the members, which devalued it a bit. So when we got the reveal that Jimmy Thesiger, thank you for saying his name, reminded me, was the criminal mastermind, I was sort of like, okay, don't really care. Which is weird considering he was actually driving a lot of the narrative. But like we said, I didn't think his character was that well developed. Or maybe it was, because he did seem a very shallow character, and I didn't really care one way or the other. It wasn't like a big shock or anything like that. It was just like, oh, okay. And I didn't buy the fact that Lorraine Wade was his unquestioning accomplice, particularly as it meant getting her stepbrother killed to kick things off. Other than the fact that they fancied each other, I didn't really see a reason for her to just do everything that Jimmy said. Again, I think that could have been developed a little bit better. So yeah, the big revelation of those two as the criminal masterminds, like I said, was just like But that wasn't really the point of the book. The point of the book was the Seven Dials Society. So that's the real revelation, was, who are the Seven Dials? I liked the revelation that they weren't the bad guys. It was a bunch of amateur sleuths who come together to fight crime and solve mysteries and stuff like that, led by Inspector Battle. It's not something I think of in terms of that era's media. This is like creating a team of superheroes or something like that. I see that as more as a modern trope than back then. Back then, you tended to have the individual detectives or adventurers who did things, who maybe had a sidekick, but they didn't necessarily come together to form this sort of group. Somebody can probably prove me wrong. There probably is other precedents in the literature of the time, but nothing springs to my mind. So that was a nice surprise. I liked that. I did already figure out that the Hungarian Countess was the actress Bill Eversley was going on about early, and that she was one of the seven. I had a feeling that Battle was involved somehow, but I may be misremembering this because I haven't gone back and checked. What made me think that was when Bundle was in the hidey hole and she was looking at them through the hidey hole and she was describing them. I thought she said number 3 was a large, stocky, well-built guy. And I thought, the description to me sounded like the description of Battle. And I thought, Battle's one of them. But then at the reveal at the end, it was like Bill was number 3, but Bill was never described as a big, stocky, well-built guy. And Battle turned out to be number 7. So maybe I misremembered it. I do remember partway through thinking, okay, the description of one of them sounds like the description of Battle, therefore I think Battle's one of the 7. But does that mean he's a good cop or a bad cop? Or is he just infiltrated it or whatever? It made me think about things maybe not as the way that she was trying to set it up. Of course, you got the reveal at the end. They weren't the bad guys; they were the good. I thought it was a good, fun thing. Don't know if that makes sense. That ramble.
Mostly, but it's your opinion, and you're entitled to it.
Okay. Well, clearly, you don't quite agree with me, but
no. I mean, it was interesting because it's always interesting to hear what other people think.
Okay.
And I agree with you. I wasn't saying I didn't agree with you. I was saying it made sense mostly because I was being cheeky.
Okay.
Just winding you up.
Like most of the things I say, it only makes sense on occasions. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And on that note, let's talk about the writing. We touched on this a lot, but I thought was a fun, light read, like the humor in it. Again, a lot of humor. To me, the amount of humor in these books has been one of the other revelations of getting into the world of Christie. If you'd have asked me beforehand, I would never have thought of her as being a humorous writer, which makes me wonder, larger question, if a lot of the adaptations I'd watched up until then, the ones we're now watching, don't include the humor, or don't play up the humor. They play up the drama and the mystery, and sort of miss the humor that's definitely in the writing. When I posted on the Chronological Christie Instagram account that I was reading this particular book, our friends at Pershall Press put a note in that they felt it read like a parody of P.G. Woodhouse's Bright Young Men in Spats and John Buchan's 39 Steps thriller about secret societies. And I think that's a good take. I think that's a really good description of what this is. It really pulls those two sort of things together. And again, cool to see Agatha Christie continue to explore different styles and techniques of storytelling. It's one of the things I'm loving is whenever you pick up one of these books, you're not quite sure what type of story she's going to tell or what techniques that she's going to use to tell the story. And they've all been different. So really loving that part of it. And I mentioned earlier, this is one I think I will pull off the shelf and reread at some point, now knowing who the bad guys are and who the good guys are, to see if it reads any differently. Again, enjoyed this one way more than I expected to. What about you, Jill?
I think it shows Christie's light touch and sly humor, which makes it very readable and fun. But the undertones of seriousness are also very present. I think she's a genius to be able to mix these together, take on the different styles that she's trying out as she works out what her style is, how she's going to write. I think she's very clever. She uses words and situations in a very clever way to pull everything together. Genius. She's a genius. That's all there is to it. Are there anything else you want to discuss, Alan?
Yes, because I just preempted that, didn't I, by talking about
Yeah.
the end of the book. Like I said, the idea of sort of bringing a group of characters together to form a team or whatever to go fight crime, solve mysteries, be that the Scooby Gang or the Avengers or whatever, to my mind, it's more of a late 20th century, early 21st century movie and literature storytelling trope. It just made me wonder, as she spent the time to set this group up, did she ever use them again? Did the Seven Dials team group ever do anything else? Or is this, because if this was a movie, you'd watch this and think, okay, they're setting up a franchise and setting up a sequel. So I just wondered whether the Seven Dials team ever appeared again.
No.
That's a bit of a shame after going to all the effort of doing it. Because I know Battle comes, there's at least another 2, 3
with
Battle in it. Yeah.
Yeah, Battle's in a few more, but sad.
Okay, I guess she didn't really go for the concept once she created it, which is a shame. Because I think you could tell some good stories with that team, with that group.
Oh, I think so too. I agree with you. And I don't have anything. I don't have any questions or anything. So.
Okay. Before we move on to discussing the adaptations, we wanted to take a quick break to tell you about our new Patreon account, where you can get early access to our podcasts, as well as our new Patreon-exclusive Agatha Adjacent podcast series. And Patreon subscribers will also get the opportunity to submit questions for our bonus Q&A episodes. First off, a thanks to those folks who have already signed up and joined. It's great to have you on board. And it is quick and easy to join our growing gang of Patreons, starting at the Greenway level of just $5 a month. And think about all that extra Agatha goodness just for the price of a cup of coffee or tea, whichever is your preferred beverage. And you can check it out with a free 7-day trial or subscribe at patreon.com/Chronological Christie. And thanks for your support.
Adaptations. Following their success of their version of Why Didn't They Ask Evans in 1980, The Seven Dials Mystery was adapted by London Weekend Television as a 140-minute television film and transmitted on Sunday, the 8th of March, 1981. The same team of Pat Sandys, Tom Warmby, and Jack Williams worked on the production, which again starred John Gielgud and James Warwick. Cheryl Campbell also starred as Bundle Brent. Production was extremely faithful to the book with no major deviations on the plot or characters. What did you think of this, Alan?
It was a fun and surprisingly highly accurate adaptation, more accurate than a lot of the other ones we've watched. I like the fact it effectively conveyed the whole house party atmosphere at the time. And I thought it was also had an excellent cast who on the whole played their parts really well. Again, as I mentioned, having just read the book, it was interesting to watch it knowing who the villain was and who the Seven Dials were, as it added a little bit of extra depth to some of the dialogue exchanges and particularly some of the shared glances and facial expressions. It was like, oh, okay, I understand why they're sort of looking at each other like that, or why those two people just sort of, checked something between the two of them, or pieces of dialogue could be taken either way. I thought that was good that they sort of fed that into the adaptation as well. It wasn't just the surface stuff, that there was the undercurrent there was, once you knew who the bad guys were and who the good guys were. Standout for me was John Gielgud as Lord Caterham. I mean, John Gielgud's good in pretty much everything, but he was great as Lord Caterham. And the scene between him and Terence Alexander, who was playing George Lomax, was brilliantly choreographed and funny with them. It was sort of this glass of whiskey being poured and moving between the two of them as Lomax kept thinking that the whiskey was for him, but it ended up being Lord Caterham's glass. I thought that was beautifully done and funny. I was also very impressed by Christopher Scola, who has Bill Eversley. I can't say I really knew him from anything else, but I loved the way he slid between performing the role as an apparent buffoon to switching to being an undercover agent who was alert and effortlessly getting on with things, and then back to the buffoon and then back to the undercover. Once you knew he was one of the Seven Dials, it added an extra depth to his performance. So I thought he was very good. And a big shout out to James Warwick as the bad guy, Jimmy Thesiger, who I thought was just creepy and obsequious enough without going too far. He was much better developed, I felt, here than he was actually in the book as a character. I don't know if that was the director or James Warwick, the actor, whichever one who did that, but really made him feel more like that slightly friend who's just on the edge of being creepy, but you're not quite sure. And then as things went on, his character started to change subtly, and then, once the reveal, he was like the out-and-out villain. I thought he did very well. I thought Harry Andrews' battle was a little too stiff, a bit stiff and one note, but again, that's how he comes across in the book to me. So, it could have been a good performance. I wasn't too keen on Cheryl Campbell as Bundle, but I know Jill has a lot more to say on that one, so I'll leave that one to Jill. Production-wise, I really felt it was a product of its time. It does feel like a 1980s adaptation. It felt very stage-like to me. The interior sets looked like stage sets, with the sort of sofa always being in the mid-shot and people, entering stage left and stage right and moving sort of across that plane of the set and not moving backwards and forwards towards the camera. And it felt like the camera was very static, other than a few like zooming close-in shots, but there was not a lot of dynamic camera work. So it felt a little stilted from a modern perspective, I think. But yeah, the plot changes were very minimal, and the few that they did, I think, helped explain a few things from the novel. For instance, the novel really never explains why that party of girls and friends were weekending at Chimneys to begin with. Here, they did it very simply by just inserting one line of dialogue that one of the girls was Lady Coots's goddaughter. That's all it needed, and it was like, oh, okay, now I understand why this group of young people is hanging out at Chimneys, and Lady Coots is a little annoyed that they're there. It made sense. On the other hand, there was a couple of things that were from the novel that they left out early and then referenced later on. So I don't know if they were in an early draft of the script and got cut and they didn't change it in the later draft of the things that were later in the script. Nothing huge things, just very small things, but it just might have been confusing to people who hadn't actually read the novel. Or other than that, I thought for its time, it was very well done, great cast, and a very good, faithful adaptation, which probably happily watch it again. What about you, Jill?
Again, it was nice that it was such a faithful adaptation. I enjoyed it, especially John Gielgud. He, as you said, he is really good, but I think being Lord Caterham, it was like the role was written for him. It was absolutely delightful. The scenes with him were definitely the highlight. They were funny, but I would say most of the characters were well cast, except for me. And now here I go on my ramble about Bundle. She was too sharp, too hard for my picture of her. I know to have grown up as the daughter of such a man as Lord Caterham, who very self-centered, very vague about a lot of things. She probably had to be a bit more managing, but it wasn't just her voice, her dress, everything was very definite and sharp. And I can't see why she had any friends, let alone two men who wanted to marry her, because she was just... It was the thing that spoiled the thing for me, is because whilst I expected her to be kind of gung-ho, more leaning towards the jolly hockey sticks, I didn't expect her to be quite so sharp. And I think that's what spoiled it for me. But her scenes with John Gielgud as Lord Caterham were the best part of the whole thing. Just brilliant. And because she was so sharp and hard and gung-ho, that whole thing about why she suddenly started screaming because of a doorknob moving, I just didn't understand why they wrote that in at all. She was brave enough to get up and be walking around a house at night knowing stuff was going down, yet a doorknob moved and she just started screaming and running and crashing into things. Didn't seem in character at all. And that is down to the director, and her being as sharp as she was is down to the director, not the actress. But the scene with her and her father playing golf was just very cleverly choreographed and funny. And so I can forgive the choices they made for that, because it was just a delightful scene. And George Lomax, when they did The Secret of Chimneys and the adaptation, I thought the guy in that, can't remember his name, played him brilliantly. He was oily, slimy, slightly creepy. He's going to get things done. He wanted to be prime minister, very ambitious. But this guy came across as being a buffoon rather than an astute workaholic politician. But the scene with Lord Caterham and the passing of the whiskey glass and the golf ball was just comic genius. It was so cleverly done, so quietly done. I think it should be used in film schools, some of these scenes, to show how you can be funny without using knockdown, obvious humor. It's not needed when you can do humor like this. I didn't feel that Lady Coote's melancholy came over. The way she was played, she seemed very happy with her lot. But that's fine. She still had some great scenes with the playing bridge and making sure her husband paid up when he needed to. James Warwick as Jimmy Thesiger was very good, as you said, especially as he changed as the movie went on. I thought he did it very well, but I felt like Lucy Guttridge as Lorraine was underwhelming at the most. Very unbelievable, like in the book, that she would do whatever he wanted her to do. The guys that played the young men were buffoonish and easily forgettable, which I think was part of how they were meant to be played, even though they were important people. I thought they did that quite well. But the chair in the scene with Lorraine and Lord Caterham was something I'd never seen before, where he folded one arm side down and back so that he could sit next to her. I mean, it was a bit creepy that he was playing it on with this very young girl. But it was more about the chair. I've never seen anything like that. Had you?
No. When he did it, we both went, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I've never seen a chair like that where the side basically is hinged to open sideways. So you could, as you said, so somebody could slide into the chair from the side. Very interesting.
Yeah. And if anybody's ever seen one, let us know. I thought they were rather abrupt with the handover between the Cootes when they were renting Chimleys and Lord Caterham taking back possession. One scene to another. It took me a minute to realize, oh, hang on, they're back at Chimneys. The Cootes are gone.
I think that's one of the things I would mention where they didn't reference something that was in the book. And it didn't really come over that well, that the Cootes had been renting it. And then whatever period, the Caterhams were back in. Like you said, it was just in a very abrupt switch. And that took me a second too. It was like, oh, okay. If I hadn't read the book, I wouldn't have necessarily figured out that that's what was going on.
Right. And I think the book missed the whole gardening scene, the adaptation. They missed that from the book because I thought that was very clever, how, differently they dealt with him. But I haven't read the book and already knowing the denouement, I thought it was well done. I loved the way all those doors opened and the Seven Dials members walked into the room. Thought that was very atmospheric.
Yes, that was very dramatic, the way they did that. I thought it was very
It's very cool. Especially on what was probably a relatively low-budget movie. Still disappointed Bundle hadn't worked it out. I felt she was smarter than that. Didn't like that ending bit. I mean, it was like the book, but surely it's not that easy to put unconscious people upright in a small closet like that without them falling out while you're trying to shut the door. That seemed very unrealistic to me. Don't know about you.
Could try it with the hallway closet if you like.
No thanks.
Okay.
Allowing for how bad some of the 1970s to 19 adaptations can be, this was a good one. And it's where I get my memory from, that Bundle did a lot more rather than where I thought it was in The Secret of Chimneys. So this success of adapting Agatha Christie book led to the same company commissioning The Secret Adversary and Agatha Christie's Partners in Crime for a 1983 transmission. Now, we've already covered some of these, so we're not going to go over them again, but it's interesting that this book came before them, which is why I wanted to note that. And also, in 2024, Netflix announced plans for an adaptation of the novel to be written by Chris Chibnall and directed by Chris Sweeney, with Suzanne Mackey as executive producer and starring Mia McKenna-Bruce as Bundle, Helena Bonham Carter as Lady Caterham, and Martin Freeman as Battle. So I'm not really quite sure why we've got a Lady Caterham. She was dead a long time ago.
A little bit of gender swapping there, but I can see Helen Bonham Carter playing that sort of flustered, not quite with it character really well.
I was going to say that. I can see her playing that not quite of this world part very well. But again, coming back to what we said earlier about bad adaptations, why do you have to change something? If it's a good enough story, you want to spend money making it. Why then spend more money changing it? But I think Martin Freeman will be great as Battle, although he's not big. And
I've seen some, I don't know if you've seen it, there has been some on-set photos released of the film production. He's a great actor, and I'm sure he'll play the part very well. But I don't get him as physically as Battle. Harry Andrews, who I mentioned earlier, was stiff, but big, imposing guy who dominates a room just by being stood in it. And that's the impression I get of Battle, and that is not Martin Freeman. I love him in virtually everything he's done that I've seen him in, but I'm just not buying him as Battle. And the set photos didn't do anything to relieve that thought, but we'll see when it comes out. I know we're recording this just after this year's Agatha Christie festival, and I know Chris Chibnall was one of the guests there. So maybe more about the adaptation came out at the festival that we don't know about yet. I'll be interested to see it. It sounds like a good production company. It sounds like a good cast. Just got a couple of little question marks over it based on the 3 or 4 set photos I've seen, but I'm sure they will be well addressed by the time we actually sit down and get around to watching it. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing what they do with it with a modern adaptation.
Yeah, I'm a bit iffy. Some of the more modern adaptations I've seen, I haven't cared for. Some of the changes they decide to make. This need to make changes for change's sake bemuses me. If you don't want to do the story as it is, write your own. That's just how I feel about it. I just don't understand all that. But they get assigned the rights. They're allowed to do those changes. I understand that. We'll watch it. But I still don't understand why you'd want to pay out money for things and then change it. Because then you're paying more money to change something that already has good bones. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to make it.
That's the movie industry for you, or TV.
I know. Anyway, moving on from my little soapbox. Favorite quotes. As I said earlier, there's very little written about Agatha Christie in 1929. So this quote is from her first visit to Ur, as it's shown how interested and fascinated she was with archaeology on just one visit. This is from Lucy Worsley's wonderful Agatha Christie, An Elusive Woman. Here, picked up by me, this broken fragment of a clay pot, handmade with a design of dots and cross-hatching in black paint, is the forerunner of the Woolworth cup out of which every morning I have drunk my tea.
I love that idea of her seeing the precursor to the regular china cup, that she has a tea being connected all the way back to pottery from the dawn of civilization. I was being more prosaic about that, talking about the dawn of civilization, and you have to throw in Woolworths. But no, I was just going to say, I just love that shows her mindset that she can make that connection.
Yeah. And my mind went to, Agatha Christie drank tea out of a cup from Woolworths. I mean, it puts you on an even keel, because, we bought stuff at Woolworths. It's just interesting. That's all.
To be honest, I hadn't even thought about that. But yes, I guess, well, at this stage, she wasn't lady, or she wasn't mega famous or mega rich at this point, but she still came from a wealthy family. So yeah, maybe.
Well, she was famous. She didn't come from a wealthy family, but she probably had, even when she said she was poor, she probably had more money than my family had when I was growing up.
Yeah. Circles of society that she ran in. You wouldn't have necessarily thought of them as getting drinking cups from Woolworths. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. So I think we both had very different ends of the spectrum interpretations of that quote. Interesting. I guess that wraps it up for this episode. So thanks for joining us for this episode of the Chronological Christie podcast. If you would like to leave a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform, that would be great. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And a note of thanks to those folks who have given us ratings and reviews and the occasional feedback. Really appreciate it. And if you'd like to discuss any aspects of this episode, you can message us on the Chronological Christie Instagram account, a link for which will be in the show notes. And you can also find us on social media at Jill. Where can you be found?
I can be found on the Chronological Christie Instagram, TikTok and Threads accounts, and my author TikTok under Gilly Kent.
And I can be found on most social platforms by searching for @Alan J. Porter or via my author's website at alanjporter.com. And if you want to keep up with our various writing projects, you can sign up for our free bi-weekly newsletter at alanjporter.substack.com.
The books discussed on this podcast can be found on a dedicated Chronological Christie section of our online bookstore at bookshop.org. The link will also be in the show notes. Please join us for our next episode where Alan will be introduced to Miss Marple for the first time. Very exciting, in Murder at the Vicarage. We look forward to you joining us. I just want to point out that if you're going from the Agatha Christie site, technically the next book that was published before that is Agatha Christie as Mary Westmacott in Giant's Bread. We will be covering her books as Mary Westmacott either on the Patreon account or after we've finished all the ones under Agatha Christie. So don't get mad at us, but we're not covering that yet. We're doing Murder at the Vicarage next. Thank you.
The music used in this episode was extracted from I'm Somebody's Somebody Now by the Joe Venuti Orchestra and is a public domain recording. The Chronological Christie podcast is a production of Megrin Entertainment, a division of 4J's Group, LLC.